So last time we were talking about cellular respiration and photosynthesis, and we were talking about how you can start with things that don't have much energy at all, like carbon dioxide. You could breathe that all day and not get any energy out of that and still be hungry. And you can drink water all day and still be hungry. But plants do this amazing thing. They take that stuff, plus they take the energy from sun, and they convert that energy into chemical energy using these raw materials. These don't have much energy in them, but glucose certainly does. And then you have the waste product that plants or algae make. That's oxygen. So this process is called photosynthesis. If you go backwards, what we do and what plants do when they want to use their sugar is this. It's called cellular respiration. So we'll take glucose or any molecule that has energy in it, could be a protein or whatever, and it'll be a slightly different path, but the easiest path to look at is glucose. So we'll take glucose and oxygen, and we'll break this apart. We'll take off the electrons, we'll move the hydrogens to different places, and we end up breaking this stuff down, but taking the energy from this and converting it into something called ATP. So this stuff gets broken down to make these low energy products, the things that don't have much energy, plus the energy called ATP. And so this energy, if we're talking about photosynthesis, would be sunlight. And if we're going the opposite way for cellular respiration, that energy would be ATP. So we were just talking a little bit about ATP, and that's the topic for today's notes. Cellular respiration, however, allows some energy to be stored in the bonds of a more useful molecule called ATP. So glucose has energy in it, but if I want to contract my muscles, I don't use glucose directly. I do use ATP. If I want to move something out of a brain cell, I don't use glucose directly. I use ATP. And so we have to be able to break down glucose or protein or whatever and make ATP, because every tiny little part of your body that needs energy gets it directly from ATP. So here's what ATP looks like. It's got these three different parts to it. It's got a sugar part, this base part, and these phosphate groups. If you remember the stuff from the organic chemistry unit, this part of it should look like something. It should look like something you've seen before. This is actually a nucleotide of RNA. So the polymers are DNA and RNA, and the monomer is this nucleotide. ATP, though, the T means tri. So this thing that I've circled is actually called AMP, adenosine monophosphate, and the adenosine part comes from the adenine. Remember how DNA and RNA have RNA has A, U, C, G. ATP only is the A part. So this thing is AMP. If you add another phosphate group, you don't have adenosine monophosphate, you have adenosine diphosphate. And if you have all three, you've got this thing called ATP, adenosine triphosphate. And so this is the energy molecule that we use. So you break down glucose in order to make this stuff. And it's the bonds in here that are super important to break. So the burning of food that takes place during metabolism leads to the same chemical endpoint as regular burning would have done. It's converted to the same stuff as if you just take a bowl of sugar and light a match to it and throw it in. It's converted to carbon dioxide and water. So you have carbon dioxide and water as waste products, and heat as a waste product too. But you have one more thing. Organisms, however, use a lot of the energy in glucose to make ATP, whereas burning glucose just converts the chemical bond energy into heat. So this is the important part. We do release heat just like we do if you burn these trees, but the important thing is that we also make ATP, which you can use for running or thinking or whatever it is that you're doing. So what is ATP? ATP is a nucleotide or a monomer called adenosine triphosphate. So ATP. And it looks like this again. So again, if you remember, there are carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, and nucleic acids. This is a nucleic acid. And there are monomers of nucleic acids, and the monomers of nucleic acids are called nucleotides. So things like DNA and RNA, those are made out of nucleotides. And so you have a whole bunch of nucleotides together and you make a polymer called DNA and RNA. ATP is not like that. ATP is actually a monomer. So it's a monomer of RNA, and it looks like this. Here's your sugar, here's your phosphate, here's your base. The only difference is that instead of having one phosphate, you've got 3 phosphate groups. So ATP is the energetic molecule that cells use directly to do anything. So it's like your lunch card. You can't buy lunch in the school cafeteria with your dad's 401k. Your dad's 401k has money in it maybe, right? And grandpa's social security check, well, that's money too. But you can't give the lunch lady your 401k or your dad's social security card. What you need is your lunch card or maybe cash. And ATP works like that. So that's the way it is with cells too. You can eat carbs and lipids and proteins. They all have energy. But to use the energy, your body has to convert them or break them down to form ATP. The organelle in all of your cells that does this is the mitochondrion. So these are the mitochondria. There are a bunch of other organelles in here. You've got the Golgi body, the endoplasmic reticulum, and a lysosome, and a centriole over here. But the mitochondria are the ones that do this. There are cells, certain bacterial cells, that don't use a mitochondria to do this process. But all complicated cells do it this way. So in class, this is what I'm having the kids do. Work together, distinguish between photosynthesis and cellular respiration, and show me the formulas. Don't forget the energy and tell me who does each. So here's what I want them to do, and here's what I want you to do. You can pause it and work, and then you can look at the answers that I have. So this could be cellular respiration. And over here is photosynthesis. Whoops. Okay, so pretend I wrote that better. So pause this and think about it now. And I'm going to tell you what I would want them to write. They're going to talk about CO2 and H2O. And if you are really good, you can put your numbers in there. 6 of these and 6 of these. And sunlight. And you make glucose. And your waste product is oxygen. So the thing that I would, well, so let's do the opposite one here. This one, cellular respiration. You start it with food, like glucose, C6H12O6. And you need the oxygen that you breathe. You actually need 6 of these, and of course there's 6 of these over here. And then you break them down to carbon dioxide plus water, and you've got, squeeze it in, you've got 6 of each of those. And you make ATP. Both have energy conversions in them. In this case, you're taking sunlight energy and converting it into chemical energy. In this case, they're both chemical energy, but you're going from glucose to ATP. You release some heat in this as well. And let's see, with photosynthesis, I want you to know that it happens in a chloroplast, unless we're talking about bacteria. So you can say, except when it happens in bacteria. And you should put that only producers can do this. Hopefully you can write a little bit smaller than I can. For cellular respiration, this happens in the mitochondria. Unless you're a bacterium. So again, you can put except bacteria. Bacteria can do a process similar to this, but they wouldn't be doing it in their mitochondria. Let's see. Who does each of these? So photosynthesis is only done by producers, so we're talking about plants and algae and certain bacteria. Cellular respiration is done in some form by everybody. So you wouldn't really call fermentation the same thing as cellular respiration, but the general gist is that if you're breaking down glucose into something smaller and making ATP, everybody does something like that. So even a yeast, when there's no oxygen, will do fermentation, and they'll break this 6-carbon molecule into a 3-carbon, couple of 3-carbon molecules, but they still will make ATP. So everybody on Earth does some kind of breaking down to make ATP. And here's the confusing thing. Sometimes kids will think plants over here, animals over here, and they're only half right. Yes, plants over here, but why would a plant bother to make glucose if it couldn't break it down to make ATP? And the answer is it wouldn't bother. It doesn't make its glucose for us, it makes its glucose for itself. We're just lucky enough to get it from them. Which reaction is this? So is this photosynthesis or cellular respiration? So you take glucose and you break it down. If you're breaking down glucose, oh, I do that. That must be cellular respiration. Which types of organisms do this? Let's see, glucose, and here's my arrow. So breaking down glucose, oh, I do that when I eat. So which types of organisms do that? So is that just animals, or do plants ever break down the glucose they make? The answer is plants do it too, so that would be both. The energy shown below, let's see, again, you're taking glucose and breaking it down, and so you must be making ATP. Because when I break down my glucose, I don't shine like the sun. Nothing that spectacular ever happens to me. Which reaction is this? So I'm taking raw materials here and some kind of energy and making glucose. Oh my goodness, who can make glucose? That's such an impressive thing, to make your own glucose. Nope, I don't do that from these things. If all I have is CO2 and water, I get very, 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 very hungry. So that's got to be plants. That's photosynthesis. Which types of, that should say of, which types of organisms do this reaction? Take glucose and water, again, very low energy things. I would get very hungry, so I can't do that. I couldn't make glucose by myself. I'd get really hungry if that's all I had to have. All I could do, breathe and drink water. So plants must do that. The energy balloon is shown. Let's see this. So this is the energy shown below is. So again, who takes carbon dioxide and water and puts them together to make glucose? Plants do. And so this has got to be sun. And so that's how I want you to think through these problems. What is combustion? That's just burning. So that's just a vocabulary word to learn. What does cellular respiration produce? Cellular respiration produces two things, so be careful. It produces, I don't know why I have making here, it produces ATP and it also produces heat. What does photosynthesis produce? Photosynthesis produces glucose. There's actually some ATP in some of the steps, but hey, just about all of our energy comes from the sun. Whoops. What molecule do cells use directly for all of their energy needs? The answer there is ATP. Here are some examples of what your body, so that is it for right now.